what you'll see now is some perhaps further deeper food and beverage manifestations, and you'll be able to see some of the connection between that shopper of the future and what we're talking about over the next 12 months or so. So what I'm going to do is introduce you to the top 10 trends, the top 10 to remember for 2021, and a little bit of this context has already been covered, but last year we had a global driver of securing the future, and we're heading this year already into a period of what we've called owning the reset. And owing to all of the global events that we're all very familiar with, we're seeing a big shift in lifestyle over the last sort of 12 months and into the future, as we all decide, and I think everybody on the call can relate to that we all decide how we want to react, behave, choose and consume in these times of change. There's also been very much a reset of responsibilities towards a more self-sufficient, self-centered, self-contained lifestyle, and consumers are aligning themselves with the tribes, the people, the groups that they believe can most positively impact change from their perspective. So as always, we've taken many thousands of hours of research to date, our understanding of how society behaves in a food and drink context in times of change, combined with our experience of kind of industry, gastronomy, the human sciences, to build what we call a sense-making foresight framework, which those of you that have access to our content through the regional food hubs and the cluster leads will be familiar with much of this. The 21-22 framework is made up of one global driver, 4 social and cultural forces, 11 food and beverage megatrends, and over 60 granular trend manifestations. But what I've done for today is I'm just going to focus on the top 10 takeouts rather than the complexities, or try and walk you through the complexities of that framework in about 20 minutes. So top 10 is very much the focus for today. And what we've done is develop this by analysing where these trend manifestations were in 2019 and 2020, our understanding of the wider social and cultural landscape, and what we expect that influence to be over the next year to 18 months. And that then delivers us our top 10 trends for 21-22. And I would hope already you could start to see some connection between what's on the screen and the sort of broader forces that June was just talking through a couple of moments ago. So let's look at these in a wee bit more detail. So we'll start off with 2 that are natural bedfellows, mini splurge and thrift. Today, less is most definitely more. Consumers are looking for and are getting thrifty, yes, from a cost perspective, but also for environmental reasons as well, reducing the impact of food and food waste, taking much more of a make, do and mend approach when it comes to food and drink. Whilst some consumers may be starting to feel the pinch, they still want to treat themselves with those little touches of luxury and edible indulgence, and food and drink couldn't be better placed to be able to deliver on these 2 particular trends. It's all about the juxtaposition of splurge and thrift in this case. So even during economic downturns, consumers treat themselves, I think we've already established that, to small luxury items, sometimes called lipstick effect. Effectively, we're talking about small mechanics to be able to treat and reward in what is going to be, for many people, tough times economically. So consumers will be looking for little ways to upgrade everyday meals and rituals. So perhaps toast gets swapped out for baked from frozen chocolate croissant, or the regular burger becomes a bit more like the truffalo burger, the example on the screen there, with all the kind of trimmings, or the example on the top right hand side of the screen there, that kind of personal shared reward in the form of, in this case, a self-care box. So think about those small luxurious touches that make that elevate to the next level. So is it a burger made with bone marrow, or pasta tossed in truffle oil. It's those types of things. Things like homemade biscuits, cupcakes, elevated with things like you know, very, very small amounts of gold leaf. We saw that a few years ago. That's very much coming back. Elderflower custard filled donuts. Yet others might be wanting to swap out the plain regular cup of tea, for instance, with a mug of premium hot chocolate or a nitro iced tea. So that's a little bit about mini splurge. Let's talk about the opposite to that, which is around thrift. And we're increasingly expecting consumers to embrace, continue to embrace thriftiness in this period of uncertainty. Yes, in an effort to reduce outgoings, but also, as I mentioned, to mitigate waste as well. The throwaway culture is very much being replaced with a make, do and mend, and even big brands like Tommy Hilfiger and Bowden, as an example, are repurposing outside of food, pre-worn, pre-used garments, that type of thing. When it comes to food is concerned, we saw during the course of last summer, and we see the early signs of it this year, this kind of grow your own culture is also expected to surge in popularity, both in with the in-home space, but also chefs and in the out-of-home world very much embracing this kind of local connection and growing as well. So we also expect within this particular one the rise of scratch cooking to continue, whatever your skill level. Not only to exercise a level of control, which obviously scratch cooking does, but also to leverage those newfound skills, making sure that nothing goes to waste. So that means renewed interest in things like root to stem eating, as an example. And then you've got the other slightly more niche movements, things like nose to tail, fin to gill, which are perhaps the next frontiers. Also getting a new lease of life are leftovers. There's lots of sites and apps encouraging us all to use leftovers and how to apply them in a really compelling and motivating way. So we've talked about splurge and thrift. Now let's move to talk a bit about comfort. This for us sits as part of a broader mega trend called the new cocoon. And whilst the wider world is uncertain and stressful, so consumers want to make their own world, i.e. their home and their family, as comfortable as possible. We expect them to continue to seek solace in comfort food, certainly for the duration of this year. Comfort through larger shops, recipe planning apps that we've already spoken and heard about, organizational apps to keep on top of things. At a food level, the obsession with baking continues unabated, dovetailing with this year's carb comeback, things like gourmet sandwiches, but also basic comfort foods like lasagna, noodles, pizza, being embraced not only just by home cooks, but also professional chefs alike. In our menu analysis shows us that during these times and our conversations with chefs about the menus that they're planning when it comes to reopening, comfort is still a very major theme within what they're thinking. So comfort is very much set to rule when it comes to cooking and eating. Comfort is a reassurance, it's a ritual, a food, a time, a place, or an experience, either in the present or even perhaps in the past as well, when it comes to childhood memories and those types of things as well. It's one of food is one of those things that we call and describe as being polysemic, and what that means is it means different things to different people at different times, and comfort food is a really, really good example of this. Comfort food could be fried chicken with a cheese sauce, but equally it could be the Hetty McKinnon's noodle, ginger and turmeric broth, as you see on the screen there. It could be breakfast in bed, or tapping into that kind of home bake scene. So the Asda scoop and bake example, there's a really good example of that. And it ties into the wider style culture that we're seeing at the moment, which is shifting particularly during winter into that kind of warm and cozy space. We're even seeing things like hygge, which was around and became very popular a couple of years ago, the Nordic lifestyle movement, just at this moment in time, getting a new lease of life and a new relevance. In the kitchen, it's also about comfort and ease, leisurely breakfasts, soothing soups, broths, tray bakes, those types of things. Old cooking crock pots, slow cookers are also very much back in fashion as well. And as well as comforting, slow cooking also has that benefit of making a little go a long way. So cheap joints become rich stews, simple lentils become a comforting dal. So lots we expect to continue when it comes to the world of comfort. Then one that's very, very prominent, one of the biggest disrupting factors in and around food and drink is kind of home delivery. For us, it sits as part of the mega forces of New Cocoon and the Flexi channel. The online and home delivery revolution was well underway pre-pandemic, and its relevance has only really been amplified by it. Today's consumer wants everything and anything delivered and quickly. So this notion of at home has moved very much from novelty to necessity, and retail brands and hospitality businesses have and we believe will continue to turn to direct to consumer. And that notion of people going to food shifts into getting food to people. So just to talk about that in a little bit more detail, we're seeing established brands from within the sector as well as emerging competition from outside the sector of out of home, out of conventional delivery. Many local and independent businesses are also embracing home delivery and direct to consumer, as the line between what is traditionally in home and out of home continues to blur, and we expect that blur to continue into the future. Perhaps the biggest surge in the sort of home delivery front, though, comes from the guises of virtual and ghost kitchens, hot food brands through dark kitchens, and delivered themed food and beverage kits and boxes very much for every occasion. It's estimated that the whole kind of ghost operation, the ghost kitchen, the opportunity around that could reach 1 trillion by 2030. And the pandemic has shifted the delivery share of total addressable share of market forward by 2 to 3 years. And in conversations that we're having with some of the bigger players, some of them are so bullish on the sector that particularly those that live within the urban environment, they believe it will be far cheaper, tastier, and quicker to always get food delivered. I mean, we'll obviously see on that front as we move forward. And the examples on the screen there really just bring that to life. Simon Rogan at home, sort of high-end restaurants. I'm sure many of you perhaps would have tried these over the last few months. Bringing those premium food experience, those restaurant experiences into the home. Really nice example of the opportunity to collaborate in this space. I think the two burger greats, if you like, Patty and Bun and Shake Shack, bringing the best parts of their burger offer together for a limited edition collaboration in their Patty Shack product. And I think that's something to really think about within this particular space. This relatively new route to market brings with it blurred lines, as we've already heard, that allow potential partnerships and collaborations within this space. So very much something to think about. And then a very foodie one. In a world where the elements of comfort are key, also the hearth becomes the home. Fire cooking may not be new at all. Obviously, we've been cooking over fire for millennia, but the way that we're engaging with fire cooking and the level of sophistication around that continues to evolve at pace, both in restaurants, but also in the at-home environment as well. Both home cooks and chefs alike continue to get ever more creative around the sphere of fire cooking, from experimenting with different wood types to layering fire flavors over each other. We're seeing much more in this particular space, and also going beyond the conventional barbecue borders as well. So live fire is very much an analog expression of craft and skill that tame the flame, both at home and in the kitchens. We're seeing new woods, things like olive and chestnut, hickory, grapevine to deliver those kind of nuanced flavors, embers and temperatures. And you've got Wales's very own Thomas Parry doing a great job of that at Brat and his other pop-ups that he's got going on as well. There's also a lot of increased sophistication around equipment. So for those of you that are in the kind of restaurant world that are on the call today, but this is happening both indoors and outdoors, spits, tandoors, open hearth cooking, you know, pizza ovens, asados, bitutan and charcoal grills, those types of things as well. And it's also moving into a kind of an all-day fire cooking space as well. So it's not just about pieces of meat, but also think desserts, vegetables, into breakfast and brunch as well. Basque cheesecake is a really good example of that. And similarly, it's not just the preserve of the American barbecue scene. We've seen lots of different cuisine influence within barbecue and fire cooking as well. Japanese, Mexican, Middle Eastern, Scandinavian, as well as, of course, regional American. And the last point I'd make here is it's about layering fire on fire, particularly from a flavor point of view. We're seeing many more dishes in our menu analysis now, including smoked, burnt, roast, caramelized and charred, but all in one dish. So we've mentioned in the previous presentation about health, and of course there's a massive focus on health. Two areas that we wanted to pick out. It sits for us as a part of the mega trend that we called Hack Our Health. The relevance of gut and mental health have only been accelerated by pandemic. There's much more about life at the moment that we can't control. So what do? We turn to the things that we can control. Individual, we bring it back to ourselves in this age where we've got more information than ever before. So just to take each one of those in turn, gut health has been a hot topic clearly for some time. A trip around any supermarket today throws up all manner of gut-friendly products. Kimchis, kefirs, kombuchas, as well as other products that are enriched with gut-enhancing products, cereals, chocolate, crisps, snacks, and boosted with pre and probiotics and fiber. But the appeal of these has gone way beyond simple good digestion. We understand better than ever the vital role played in the overall gut health when it comes to well-being. Indeed, it's widely stated fact that around 70% of the body's immune cells are found in your gut. And although the level of education is still in its comparative infancy, consumers are beginning to realize that there is a link between our gut health and our mental health. I mean, 90% of the body's serotonin, so our kind of happy chemical, if you like, is produced in our gut. And the examples on there really just kind of bring that to life. I really like the Chobani example there. It's their complete proposition, which is completely focused and tailored towards elevated gut health. And of course, we've got the next one, which we've called Better Mind. Like gut health, mental wellness was already a pressing issue, and the pandemic again has moved it higher up the health agenda, and we fully expect consumers to continue to adapt and adopt, not only within food, but also outside of food, with continued adoption of things like meditation, mindfulness, yoga. But consumers are also thinking beyond that when it comes to food and drink as well, thinking about holistic approach, because so many things, sleep, nutrition, exercise, all contribute to kind of broader mental well-being. Next, I want to touch on alfresco cooking and dining, sitting as part of the broader megatrend that we've called Optimize Yourself, obviously about to become super relevant as we move into this era of unwinding from COVID restriction. We're really beginning to appreciate, we saw this last year and it will increasingly relevant this year, the great outdoors more than ever before. We expect consumers to eat and cook and kind of cultivate and picnic more into the future than ever before, particularly as we start to see things unwind. It's the first appreciation of our kind of freedom beyond our kind of four walls. That means lots of kind of barbecues, picnics, garden gatherings, and restaurants too will continue to embrace sort of all alfresco dining with all manner of kind of terrace, street, curbside and event-based dining options. So we expect to see a lot more of that as we move forward over the next few months. I think during the COVID era, which we're still in and will continue to be in for the rest of this year, being out in the fresh air has this whole new appeal. Many are opting to dine outdoors, and this extends to the home as well. And this enthusiasm is set to continue into this summer as well. And this overall appreciation of just being outdoors, consuming outdoors, cooking outdoors. Last summer, we saw sort of Etsy reported a 200+% increase in searches for things like fire pits, pizza ovens, barbecues. And you can see how that's sort of manifesting itself from a product perspective as well. Really lovely example, a Welsh example from the top right hand side of the screen there on the Welsh Homestead Smokery, and their product proposition very much targeting kind of out of home consumption. Barbecuing ties very nicely into fire cooking as well. The other one, a couple more I wanted to call out. One is frozen, sitting very much as part of the food and beverage trend that we've called elevated. We have the frozen sector renaissance is very much set to continue, propelled by many of the broader forces that exist within our kind of food and drink and broader social culture. Consumers of all ages are beginning to be enticed by the taste, health, and budget credentials of frozen food. Fast-paced innovation in product and route to market very much amplified frozen foods beyond its current relevance into kind of future spaces. And in times of uncertainty, consumers seek comfort in being prepared in a world where they need to be expect the unexpected. Frozen has this sort of amplified relevance in the sort of be prepared world as being a convenient, often more natural, budget conscious and relevant, and also supporting mindful reduction in food waste as well. Frozen plays very much into that space. The sector is very much winning over consumers, both old and new. There's an exciting opportunity to convert the next generation of shoppers that are connected, are better connected, better informed, and want to make positive and sustainable choices into the future. When it comes to the food opportunities around frozen, it lays in things like plant-based. Also think new day parts and meal occasions such as breakfast and lunch, as we spend perhaps not the amount of time that we have been recently in homes, but as we transition back to work, many people are going to be working at home more than ever before. So that brings new day parts potentially into the frozen space. Cuisine-specific meal components or building blocks, dim sum is a really good example of that. But also route to market collaborations, extending the pantry with convenience, and even direct to consumer. And the examples on the screen really just bring that to life. Chin Chin, their ice cream delivered solution, which we've now seen other brands get on board with as well. So this notion of actually getting ice cream delivered through the post, which is something perhaps we wouldn't have considered before. Cinnabons, frozen innovation, very much targeting elevated breakfasts and breakfast products. And Go Go Gyoza is a great example there from LA, which is about taking humble dim sum in a frozen format, but bringing that to a direct-to-consumer space as well. And the last one that I wanted to call out, sitting as part of the mega trend that we've called rewild, loving plants couldn't be more relevant than it is today, and also into the future. We need, and I'll quote David Attenborough here, a change from viewing nature as something that's optional or nice to have to the single greatest ally that we have in restoring balance in our natural world. There's almost nowhere to hide when it comes to irresponsible practices or eye-watering air miles. Full transparency is very much sought as consumers look to support low impact. And brands are beginning to get behind broader topics that have some relevance to Love Your Veg. Things like regenerative agriculture practices, biodiversity, while consumers are choosing things like whole vegetables, holistic vegan lifestyles, and as well as plant-based food mimics as well. So the pandemic pause did nothing but accelerate the relevance of eating plants. If the motivations of, I guess, human, planetary and animal welfare weren't enough to tempt consumers to make some shift towards eating more vegetables and plants, now eating vegetables almost comes with a kind of pseudo hygiene halo because of its lack of connection with animal products. Very relevant in this reset era. In their natural form, we see ever more examples of plants being celebrated, their seasonality, their varieties, brought center stage through techniques such as confying, charring, fermenting. Also, those ultra-realistic meat replacers and alternatives begin to move with the rest of food culture as they move to shorter, more natural ingredient declarations and ingredient lists. So, a whistle-stop tour of the top trends. These are the ones really to remember for 21. As I mentioned before, this is the kind of top line from our much more granular trends framework. And those of you that have access to our content through the regional food hubs will be able to explore that in much more detail. And obviously the presentation will be available for today. And we've got a short video and a takeout infographic, which will make sure that you get as attendees from today's session. So hopefully you found that a useful and inspirational session. And thank you very much for listening.